It was the spring of 2005, when the cherry blossoms in Seoul had just started to bloom. The soft pink petals blanketed the streets of Gwanghwamun as people flocked to enjoy the brief beauty of nature. Among the crowd was Lee Ji-eun, a young woman full of life, dressed in a simple yet elegant hanbok. Her eyes, bright with the promise of youth, sparkled as she stood beneath the cherry blossom trees. Ji-hoon worked as a translator for a multinational company, often traveling between cultures. It was during one of her assignments that she met Ji-hoon, a quiet and intelligent man with a strong sense of duty. Ji-hoon was an architect, someone who saw the world not just as it was, but as it could be. From the moment they met, there was an unspoken understanding between them, a shared appreciation for both the beauty of tradition and the excitement of the future. Their relationship blossomed quickly, as though fated by the winds that carried the cherry blossom petals. Ji-hoon was drawn to Ji-eun's independent spirit and compassion, while Ji-eun admired Ji-hoon's quiet strength and commitment to his craft. Together, they shared a deep love for art, architecture, and the idea of building a future, both figuratively and literally. However, Ji-hoon's family was deeply traditional, hailing from an old lineage with strict values. They expected a bride who would not only honor their family traditions, but also provide the next generation of children. Ji-hoon, ever the devoted son, struggled with the tension between his love for Ji-eun and the unspoken expectations of his family. But in the end, his love for her was stronger, and against the quiet disapproval of his mother, they married in a modest ceremony surrounded by close friends and a few family members who supported their union. For the first few years, life was filled with happiness. Ji-hoon and Ji-eun found joy in the little things, exploring the narrow streets of Insadong, attending traditional music concerts, and cooking together in their cozy apartment. They spoke of the future, of dreams, and of the family they hoped to build. There was a time when everything seemed perfect, untouched by the harsh realities that lay ahead. The first year passed without concern. Ji-eun and Ji-hoon didn't worry about starting a family right away. They were content in their life, believing that children would come when the time was right. But as the second and third years passed, whispers began to circulate within Ji-hoon's family. Ji-eun, sensing the growing tension, sought help quietly. She visited doctors who reassured her that everything would be fine in time. She took herbal remedies, visited traditional healers, and even prayed at the temple on the edge of Namsan Mountain. Each month, she hoped, and each month, she faced disappointment. As the years wore on, Ji-eun became more and more consumed by the thought of her inability to conceive. It wasn't just the absence of a child that hurt. It was the way the absence was becoming the central focus of her life. Her once lively conversations with Ji-hoon grew quiet, their shared dreams becoming a distant memory. Every family gathering turned into a silent reminder of her failure. Ji-hoon, though supportive in his own way, couldn't fully understand the depth of Ji-eun's pain. He loved her, but his love couldn't shield her from the growing whispers of his family, especially his mother. She never said anything outright, but her sharp glances and long silences spoke louder than words. Ji-eun felt it every time she entered the room. The coldness, the subtle disapproval, the weight of expectations pressing down on her shoulders. Family dinners at Ji-hoon's parents' home became unbearable for Ji-eun. It was tradition for the family to gather once a month, a ritual that Ji-hoon's mother, Mrs. Kim, held sacred. She was a stern woman, with decades of carrying the family's honor behind her, and to her, Ji-eun's inability to bear children was not just a personal failure. It was a disgrace to the family line. At first, the criticisms were subtle. "I heard So Young is expecting her second child already," Mrs. Kim would say during dinner, casually mentioning the daughter-in-law of another family. Ji-eun would force a smile, her heart tightening. Over time, the comments grew bolder. "It's a wife's duty to continue the family line," Mrs. Kim said once, her eyes locking on Ji-eun's with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. Ji-eun began to dread these gatherings. She felt increasingly like an outsider in her own family. While Ji-hoon tried to shield her from the worst of it, there was only so much he could do. His mother's opinion held great weight, and Ji-hoon was torn between defending his wife and maintaining harmony in his family. As the years passed, Ji-eun became isolated. She withdrew from friends who had children, unable to bear the constant reminders of what she lacked. Her conversations with Ji-hoon grew strained, as every night she lay awake, wondering what more she could do. She prayed harder, visited doctors with more urgency, tried every possible remedy, yet still no child came. The pressure from Ji-hoon's family mounted with each passing year. Even Ji-hoon's father, a man of few words, began to subtly express his disappointment. Ji-hoon, for all his love for June, could not ignore the growing discontent within his family. He remained loyal to Ji-eun, but the strain on their marriage was undeniable. June could feel Ji-hoon slipping away from her. He still held her hand at night, still kissed her on the forehead before leaving for work, but there was a distance in his eyes that hadn't been there before. The pressure from his family was taking its toll on him too. He was a man caught between two worlds, his love for his wife and his responsibility to his family. The distance between them was a slow, creeping thing. At first, June barely noticed it. She told herself that Ji-hoon was just tired from work, that he was dealing with his own stresses. But as the years went by, it became clear that their once vibrant love had dulled. Not from lack of trying, but from the sheer weight of the unspoken disappointment that hung between them. They no longer spoke of the future in the way they used to. Conversations about potential baby names, the design of the nursery or future family vacations were replaced by uncomfortable silences or short, curt exchanges about daily life. June missed the way they used to laugh together, the way Ji-hoon used to gaze at her, as if she was the only person in the world. Now, when he looked at her, she saw not just love but something else, pity perhaps. Or worse, regret. June tried to be strong. She tried to tell herself that this was just a phase, that they would find their way back to each other. But as time went on, the gulf between them only grew wider. It was on a cold winter night, just days before their 15th wedding anniversary, that Ji-hoon finally made the decision that would change everything. She sat in the darkened living room, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. Ji-hoon was upstairs, likely asleep, oblivious to the storm brewing in June's heart. She had tried everything. She had prayed, pleaded, and sacrificed. And yet here she was, 15 years later, childless and broken. She couldn't bear it any longer. The endless disappointment, the weight of her failure, the silent judgment from her husband's family. It was too much. And so, in a moment of desperation, Ji-hoon made the most difficult decision of her life. She would set Ji-hoon free. She would ask him to marry another woman, one who could give him what she could not, children. The next morning, June sat across from Ji-hoon at the breakfast table, her heart pounding in her chest. She had rehearsed the words in her mind all night, but now that the moment was here, her throat felt dry, and her stomach twisted with fear. "I've been thinking," June began, her voice barely a whisper. Ji-hoon looked up from his cup of tea, his brow furrowing in concern. "I think it's time for you to marry another woman," she said, the words rushing out before she could stop them. There was a long, stunned silence. Ji-hoon stared at her, as if he hadn't heard her correctly. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice low, almost dangerous. "I'm saying that I can't give you children," Ji-hoon said, her voice trembling. "And I know how much your family wants them. I've thought about this for a long time, and I think it's the only way. You deserve to have a family, Ji-hoon. You deserve to be happy." The atmosphere in the house shifted irreversibly after Ji-hoon's proposal. Ji-hoon, who had always been composed and emotionally reserved, was shaken to his core. He couldn't believe what Ji-hoon had suggested. For days, he didn't speak about it, hoping it was just a moment of desperation and that she would change her mind. But Ji-hoon, in her quiet resolve, stood firm. She had made her decision out of love, twisted and painful as it was, and she wouldn't go back on it. The process of finding another wife felt mechanical, sterile, and without joy. Ji-hoon's mother, Mrs. Kim, was more than eager to assist in the search. She saw this as a chance to finally have the grandchildren she had longed for. With her approval, the family began discreetly looking for a suitable match for Ji-hoon. Despite Ji-hoon's resistance, the wheels were in motion and soon, a match was found. Seo Mi-young, a young woman in her late 20s, was chosen. She came from a respectable family, rooted in traditional values, and carried herself with quiet grace. Mi-young was everything Ji-hoon wasn't: youthful, fertile, and untouched by the strain of 15 years of marital turmoil. Ji-hoon felt nothing toward her at first. It wasn't Mi-young's fault, of course. She was innocent in this arrangement. But Ji-hoon resented the circumstances, resented the way things had played out. When Mi-young moved into the house, the dynamic became even more strained. Ji-hoon, who had given up her role as a wife, now watched as her home was shared with another woman. Mi-young was kind, perhaps even too kind, which only deepened Ji-hoon's guilt. Mi-young respected Ji-hoon's position in the family, even looked up to her as the first wife, but this respect came with a deep sense of awkwardness. The two women lived under the same roof, but a vast emotional chasm separated them. Ji-hoon tried to remain detached. After all, this was the life she had chosen, or so she told herself. She went about her daily routines with a sense of purpose, convincing herself that she was doing what was right for Ji-hoon and the family. Yet, every time she saw Ji-hoon and Mi-young together, a part of her heart broke. It was as though her soul was slowly withering away. The first signs of Mi-young's pregnancy came as expected. Just months after their wedding, Mi-young became pregnant, much to the joy of Ji-hoon's family. Mrs. Kim was elated, hosting lavish gatherings to celebrate the forthcoming addition to the family. For the first time in years, there was a sense of happiness in the Kim household, but it was a happiness that excluded Ji-hoon. Mi-young's pregnancy progressed smoothly, and the house filled with the excitement of preparation. Mrs. Kim took charge of organizing everything, from the naming ceremony to the baby's future education. Ji-hoon, though still emotionally distant, found himself drawn into the anticipation, if only because it was his duty as a father. Ji-hoon, however, was a shadow in her own home. She smiled when necessary, congratulated Mi-young when appropriate, and performed her duties without complaint. But inside, she was crumbling. Every day was a reminder of her own failure, her own inability to provide what Mi-young could so easily give. She watched as Ji-hoon gently placed his hand on Mi-young's growing belly, something he had never done with her. The sight was both tender and unbearable. Mi-young gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl. The family rejoiced. Ji-hoon's parents were overjoyed, and the long-awaited grandchildren were celebrated as a blessing to the Kim lineage. For the first time in many years, Ji-hoon's mother smiled at Ji-hoon, but it was a smile filled with the cruel satisfaction of knowing the family's future was secure, despite Ji-hoon's shortcomings. As Mi-young recovered from childbirth, she became the center of attention. The twins were adored by everyone in the family, and Mi-young's position as the mother of the heirs was solidified. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon's place in the household became even more ambiguous. She was no longer the wife, nor was she the mother. She was an outsider, standing at the periphery of a family she had once called her own. The birth of the twins brought joy to the family, but it also intensified the judgment that Ji-hoon had faced for years. In the eyes of the community, Ji-hoon's failure to bear children now had a glaring contrast, Mi-young's effortless success. The whispers in the market became louder, the stares more direct. Ji-hoon could feel the eyes of the neighbors upon her whenever she walked through the streets. Women who had once been her friends now looked at her with a mix of pity and disdain. They whispered behind their hands, gossiping about how Ji-hoon had married a second wife and how Ji-hoon had failed to fulfill her role as a proper wife. One particularly painful moment came during a family event. It was a traditional celebration for the first birthday of the twins, a grand affair with relatives and friends from all over Seoul. Ji-hoon, as the first wife, was expected to attend and play her part. She did so with quiet grace, keeping her emotions tightly controlled. But as the celebration wore on, the whispered conversations around her grew louder. "Poor thing," one woman murmured to another, loud enough for Ji-hoon to hear. "She must feel so ashamed. 15 years and no children, and now look, someone else has done what she couldn't." Another woman chimed in, "It's no wonder her husband had to marry again. It's a man's duty to carry on the family line. How humiliating for her." The words struck Ji-hoon like knives. She felt as though the entire room was watching her, judging her, stripping her of her dignity. She wanted to scream, to cry, to flee, but instead, she stood there, frozen in place, her face a mask of composure, while her heart shattered inside her chest. After the event, Ji-hoon returned home and locked herself in her room. For the first time in years, She allowed herself to cry uncontrollably, her sobs echoing through the empty house. The humiliation, the pain, the sense of worthlessness overwhelmed her. She had given everything to Ji-hoon, to this family, and yet she was left with nothing but scorn and derision. Ji-hoon's emotional state continued to deteriorate. Each day felt like a battle to keep herself together. She had given up her role as a wife, sacrificed her happiness, and endured years of silent suffering. But the weight of it all was finally becoming too much to bear. The public humiliation she faced on a daily basis was relentless. Even in her own home, she felt like an outcast. The twins, who were now the light of the family, were a constant reminder of her own inadequacy. Though Mi-young treated Ji-hoon with respect, their interactions were filled with an unspoken tension. Ji-hoon could see the pity in Mi-young's eyes, and it only fueled the bitterness growing inside her. One evening, Ji-hoon overheard a conversation between Mi-young and Ji-hoon. They were discussing the future of the twins, their education, and the life they would build together. As Ji-hoon listened from the shadows, something inside her snapped. It wasn't just the pain of being excluded. It was the realization that she had been replaced, that the life she had once dreamed of was now being lived by someone else. In the days that followed, Ji-hoon's thoughts grew darker. She felt as though she was trapped in a nightmare from which she couldn't escape. The anger, the resentment, and the bitterness festered inside her like a poison, until one fateful day, it consumed her entirely. Blinded by her pain and desperation, Ji-hoon committed the unthinkable. In a moment of rage, she lashed out, taking the lives of the two innocent children, Mi-young's beloved twins. The tragedy shocked the family, the community, and even Ji-hoon herself. She had acted out of a place of deep torment, and the weight of her actions crushed her immediately. The aftermath of Ji-hoon's actions was catastrophic. The once joyous Kim household was plunged into grief and horror. Ji-hoon, devastated by the loss of his children, was unable to comprehend how the woman he had once loved so deeply could do something so monstrous. Mi-young, shattered beyond repair, left the family home, unable to face the memories of her lost children. The family was broken, torn apart by the tragedy. But in the midst of this devastation, a shocking revelation emerged. Ji-hoon was pregnant. It was a cruel twist of fate. After 15 long years of trying, Ji-hoon had finally conceived, but now, in the aftermath of her terrible actions, the news felt like a hollow victory. She was carrying the child she had longed for, but she had lost everything in the process. The irony was too bitter to bear. Ji-hoon was consumed by guilt. How could she bring a child into this world after what she had done? How could she, a murderer, deserve to be a mother now?